Now, before we continue our story, it's probably worth taking a couple of minutes to explain who these governors are. What is their role? So the governor, they are Rome's representative amongst the provinces. The Roman Empire, by the time of Paul, has spread right around the Mediterranean. It covers really from Britain all the way down to right down into modern-day Iran. It spreads. It's a massive, massive empire, the biggest empire that the world had seen to that point, and it was effectively been run out of Rome by the emperor, but it was being run on the ground by his representatives who were the governors. Now, the role of the governor actually goes all the way back to the early days of Rome. Rome began as a city. Rome was just the city of Rome, like literally where modern day Rome still is. And that's all it was. It was just a city. So Rome itself wasn't a country. It wasn't an empire. It was just one of many cities on the Italian peninsula. But as it rose and became more and more powerful, and as it expanded its influence, eventually it got to a point where it was ruling not just on the Italian peninsula, but actually overseas, beginning in North Africa, in Carthage, and then out into Spain, and then further off into Greece, and then over into what was Asia Minor, what is modern day Turkey. As the empire expanded, it couldn't be effectively run from the center of Rome, just by virtue of the fact that communication is so slow. You can't deal with matters on the ground when you're literally on the other side of the Mediterranean. So that's not functional. So what the Romans would do early on is they started to send out representatives. They started to send out what we call proconsuls. So the way that the early Roman Republic was run was that you'd have a Senate, which is a group of about 100 men, and every year 2 would be appointed to be consuls. They were the highest office you could have within the Roman political structure. And they would hold that position for 12 months. And what their role was to simply run Rome, just to look after the Roman Empire, and as it expanded, to look after the expansion of this Roman world. So these 2 proconsuls, they had the highest office for that year, and after a year, they'd have to step down. And this is one of the ways that Rome kept control, or it prevented the rise of a monarchy. They got rid of their kings. They didn't want to have a king anymore. And one of the ways to circumvent that was to have 2 consuls, not just one, but 2 consuls looking after Rome just for a 1-year period. So even if they were both terrible, they're going to be gone after a year. So that was the way that they sort of structured their political system. And it was just the best way to prevent monarchy, tyranny from arising. But again, as the empire expanded, what you need are people to be able to go out and function as governors, to look after these regions. Now, that's a pretty prestigious position. You are not just a representative of Rome, but your job is to maintain the empire. And as I said this 100 times, there's only 2 rules in empire: keep the peace, pay the taxes. And that's your job. Your job is to keep the peace and pay the taxes. But along with that, assuming you're corrupt, which all of them are going to be, that's a great opportunity to make money. That's a really great opportunity to get very, very rich in the couple of years that you're functioning as the governor. And there's different ways, of course, that you can do that. The fact that you are Rome's representative and you have access to the seat of power, you're going to get a lot of people who want that influence. They want you to be able to speak on their behalf and to, do you favors with Rome. And so that's going to come at a cost. And so these governors can very much enrich themselves on bribes and favors from the elites within the areas that they're ruling. But one of the chief ways that you make money out of being a governor is through the taxes. The way that the tax system works in Rome is that every 6 years, you take a census of the whole empire. How many people are in the empire? And not just generally people, but how many working or military age men are within the empire, and how much land, how many landowners, and potentially how much revenue can be taken from the lands of the empire. So you don't have a system of income tax, for example, where you pay you pay a bit of tax to the government every time you get paid. You only get charged a land tax. If you own land, then you're going to pay tax on that, and you're going to pay it with whatever the provision is that you provide, whatever food you grow or whatever it is that you provide. That's going to be your your income, but you're going to use some of that to pay the taxes to the Romans for the privilege of having that land. So you'll calculate how much each region would owe in taxes. And we see an example of this where Joseph and Mary are going down to Bethlehem because there was a census being taken. So you go back to your homeland and then you enroll yourself in the census so that the Romans have an idea of how many they've got. Anyway, the way that would work then is the Romans will say, okay, this particular region owes X amount of tax for this particular period. So that's how much they're going to owe. And over the next 6 years, it's the duty then of that province to pay their taxes, but someone needs to collect that. And so the way that that's going to work, the Romans need to have tax collectors to do their work for them, but Rome's not going to send out a whole lot of bureaucrats. They're not just going to send out armies of people from the city of Rome to do all of this work. What they're going to do instead is get the locals to do the tax collecting. Now, the most efficient way to do this is to actually auction off the taxes. So if you say to this particular region owes 1 million sesterces, for example, for this particular period, and so you'll say to all of the elites, all of the wealthy people, say, okay, you guys owe 1 million sesterces. Who wants the job? And so people would start to bid for the taxes. So then someone will say, well, I'll give you the million. Someone else will say, well, I'll give you 1.1 or then 1.2. And it would be an auction. You would actually auction off the opportunity to collect the taxes. And so then what would happen would be that the governor would collect the taxes up front and they would take the million that's owed, send that back to Rome, and they'd keep the profits. But then it was up to the tax collectors to go out and get their money back, but then some on top of that. So this was an opportunity for them to make money as well. So there's different ways that the governors are going to enrich themselves. So it's a very prestigious position. You don't just give this to anybody. You're going to give this to your top people. Now, the way what that means then is that if you've been a consul in Rome, you've done your job, you've done your year's service as a consul, you then have the opportunity to go out and be a governor. Now, they do it by lot. You basically literally have to draw a province out of a bucket, and that's the one you get. So everyone who's been functioning as consuls gets to the opportunity to become a governor somewhere. And so then whatever you've been allotted, that's where you're going to be doing your governing for the next couple of years. But these are, again, prestigious. These are coveted positions because to have got to consul in the first place, you've had to spend a lot of money. You had to climb the ranks of the Roman political structure. That's come at a huge cost. You've paid a lot of bribes. You've paid for a lot of campaigns. You've just basically paid off all of your friends to get that position because of the honor that comes along with that. But now you've got to make your money back. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're hopefully going to become the governor of a place like Macedonia, for example, which is a very wealthy region, or the governor eventually of somewhere like Egypt, which is another wealthy region. And what that means then is you're going to be able to get your money back through taxes and through bribes and through all of the other things that come along with being a governor. So that's the job of the governor. That's how we find our governors, but especially that's what the role of the governor is. They are Rome's representative, and their job is to maintain the Romanness of the region, keep the peace, pay the taxes. That's what the job is. So that's how it had always functioned. And so only the highest status, the most elite men of Rome would ever have the opportunity to hold these positions. But things change in the empire. Once you come into a Roman empire, it's a different world in which you've got an emperor who's very paranoid.